Hello everyone, this is Dr. Supriya Singh, Assistant Professor in the Department of English, Vasant Kanya Mahavidyalaya. I welcome you to the lecture number 4, week 2 of my course Understanding Deconstruction, a Critical Approach. The title of this particular lecture is An Exploration of Fundamental Concepts and Key Terms, Volume 3. Now, to start with the lecture, since we were discussing the logocentrism and arc writing in the previous lecture, which was discussing about the binary between speech and writing. So we are now coming to the term what actually binary opposition is. Binary opposition categorizes concepts into pairs of opposites, often privileging one over the other, such as good oblique evil, yeah, good slash evil. Deconstruction seeks to dismantle these hierarchies, revealing the fluidity of meaning. Now, this binary means when we are talking of good oblique evil or good slash evil, good is, according to Derrida, the term or the first or the primary term is one that is always privileged, and it is perhaps a kind of strategy where we are using the privileged term first at primary level, and the secondary term is subservient, or we can say that it is considered as the lack of the first or the primary term. So, till now, before deconstruction, there is a concept of binary opposition that has been given by or founded by Claude Lévi-Strauss while analyzing myths. So, during his analysis of myths, he has discovered that the whole universe is made up of such binaries, and he has, while discussing the myths, he has presented certain binaries. Now, according to Derrida, these binaries are not innocent. Rather, Claude Lévi-Strauss, perhaps unknowingly, has put the first or the primary term and slash the secondary term, where the primary term is something that is privileged and the secondary term is the lack of the primary term. It is always considered as lack and is given the secondary position throughout. Now, Derrida is working upon this binary and he deconstructs the idea that was till now prevailed. So, here we come to the idea, like one of the most central binary which Claude Lévi-Strauss has explored was nature versus culture, where nature is what is innate, universal, biological, things we are born with or that exist independently of human society. For example, raw food, instincts, sex, the wilderness, and so on. Now, when we are coming to culture, it is something that we learn, it is something constructed, it is social human practices and rules that shape behavior and society. For example, in nature it was raw food, but here now it is cooked food. It was earlier instinct or sex, now here marriage or taboos. Earlier it was wilderness, now it is agriculture. So, this way we find that nature is something that is always privileged and culture is something that is non privileged. It can also be understood taking recourse to Levi Strauss's essay, The Raw and the Cooked. In this particular essay, he has talked about that in a myth, if a character is shifting from raw food to cooked food, it is not just about diet that he is shifting from raw to cooked, rather, it symbolizes broader interpretation. So, according to this idea of Claude Lévi-Strauss, we come to see that the binaries in the myths are not innocent, rather, they have certain broader implications. And while doing with his raw and decooked, he has given this as an example. So, when we are working upon raw and food, we find that if someone is shifting from raw food to cooked food, It isn't just about diet, rather, it symbolizes broader interpretation where the character seems to shift from the untamed, natural, animalistic, or savage instinct to a transformed, cultured, or civilized society. So, it is also indicative of transformation from barbarism to civilization, or so on. Now, Derrida comes up to critique this tendency of binary opposition, which is everywhere in society. For Derrida, such binary oppositions are throughout, it can be found everywhere in the society. And are such oppositions even in caste, in class, in religion, and so on, where the first term is privileged and the second term is underprivileged, non privileged. So, this way, these binaries are not just giving a broader implication regarding transforming from one to another, rather, there is a strategy in keeping or in maintaining or in making of these binaries. So he critiques this tendency of binary opposition, which is everywhere in society. In Western thought, it was privileging the first term or the primary term in the binary opposition over the other. For example, speech over writing, presence over absence, and so on. Now, giving examples, Derrida says that it is not that when we are talking about the binary between presence over absence, like present over or present oblique absent, it is not that present is the privileged term and absent is just the lack of presence. Rather, according to Derrida, absent and present are dependent upon each other. Present does not have any meaning without absent, and absent also takes the meaning of present. We can also see it with another example. For example, good, oblique, evil. So, good has no meaning without evil, and evil is also useless without the idea of good. If we are implementing this upon man oblique woman, we see that what man is, in order to define man, we need to take recourse to the idea of woman. We cannot completely understand man without the idea of a woman, or simply in the binary opposition light oblique dark, we see that light is something that is positive and dark is something that is considered as lack of light. But Derrida discards this opposition and says that light does not have any meaning without the idea of darkness. So, this way, we come to an idea that Derrida is considering over the positive points, over the strengths of both the term, and this way he is trying to overturn the hierarchy in the second stage after analyzing the hierarchy that is prevailing in the society. So Derrida basically now comes up to the three stage which I had talked earlier also, but now here I'm coming to elaborate this description, that Derrida criticizes or critiques this idea of binary opposition given by Claude Lévi-Strauss. So this way he has used a three-stage method to where first is to recognize the binary, second is to overturn the binary, and third is to displace both the terms so as to avoid creating any new hierarchy. He has also given an example of binary opposition in one of his essays, The Animal That Therefore I Am. This is a collection of Derrida's seminars on animals where he explores the philosophical and ethical implications of human animal relationships. In The Animal That Therefore I Am, he challenges the traditional philosophical distinction between humans and animals, arguing that the concept of animal is a reductive and potentially violent category, and that humans are themselves animals. Derrida critiques the way Western philosophy has historically used the term animal and to define it as a category distinct from humans, arguing that this categorization is a crime of the first order against animals. He argues that the concept of animal homogenizes the vast diversity of animal life with varied species and obscures the complex relationship between humans and other species. Now, proceeding with this term, we have another term, limitrophy. And here we are going to discuss with a similar idea that the boundary between the two, that is, when we are talking of binary opposition, we have man oblique woman. So this dividing line, this boundary is not a strict, staunch, solid boundary, rather it is porous and it is also a quite wider sort of boundary where some of both the opposite terms are getting melted in order to fall in between the boundary. For instance, man is not just a man, rather, there are various types of man. They may have some feminine quality, feminine emotions, they are more like, so there is some in between idea, and women too are sometimes like man in emotion, in strength. So, this way, the two terms are not rigid, rather the boundary in between is quite fluid, where it is incorporating something of both the opposite terms. So he says that apart from science, the boundaries are also not fixed. Boundary refers to the contrasting pairs. The two seemingly opposite terms are not opposite, rather, there is a wide in between spaces. It does not consider boundaries as fixed but as dynamic spaces. So, apart from the two terms which are fluid, Derrida is also questioning the strict boundary, and he says that this boundary too is fluid, that allows to sprout or grow the categories at the limit, around the limit, by maintaining the limit, but also what feeds the limit, generates it, raises, and complicates it. Limitrophy, thus coined by Derrida in The Animal That Therefore I Am, shifts the focus from simply defining limits to challenging the traditional binary understanding, arguing that they are not simply us versus them or human versus animal, rather, there is a wide in between spaces or in between categories. We can understand it with an example, that if we are creating a binary between man and animal, I'm now going to elaborate how the boundary can be fluid. So, starting from modern man, we have modern man, intelligent or intellectuals, tribal man, a man like we have a cartoon Mowgli. So it was based on the real incidents. So we can have a man who is more like an animal. We have pets. We have pets who are understanding human expressions and emotions. We have non pets as animals. We have dangerous animals. We have animal killing humans, pets, etc. So we do not have just man oblique animal, rather, we have a long list, and they can be able to tell you the idea that there is no strict opposite and no strict boundary, rather, we have a range within the boundary. And this highlights the importance of the spaces between categories, the interstitial areas where things blur and interact rather than being neatly separated. Now, from here, we are shifting to the idea of trace. In Jacques Derrida's deconstructive philosophy, the trace basically refers to the mark or residual presence of something absent, highlighting the instability and deferral of meaning. It's the idea that meaning is not fixed, but rather fluid and dependent on context, with a sign always carrying a trace of what is not. Now, this means that when we are going to discuss the meaning of a particular word, for instance, if you are reading a theory, if you are reading the essay of Jacques Derrida, that is Structure, Sign and Play in the Discourse of Human Sciences, while reading, you are, if finding any sign problematic and you are looking for it into dictionary, you might get 4, 5 or 6 signs as meaning of that particular sign. Now it means that it is not only that a particular sign has a single meaning, rather all these signs which are indicated as meaning of this particular sign, they might be hovering around in a gray shade as meaning of that particular sign. But what happens when you go with one particular meaning, you take and paste a meaning, you can say, to a word, to a sign regarding which you had seen or looked into dictionary, and then you go on to proceed with your reading. At a particular time, you may find that this particular sign or meaning is not working, so you go on to attach another, and then you carry on, and you again find that it is also not working, you may go with the third one. And sometimes none of them works, but when teacher comes to explain, you will find that okay, event is something that is talking about, for instance, if we are taking a term event, nowhere you will find that it is a philosophical earthquake, it is a philosophical thought process. So in dictionary you won't find this meaning. So the meaning of a particular word is not present anywhere, rather several meanings, lots and lots of meanings, endless meanings are hovering around a particular sign, like, or having a ghost like presence. And what you have to do is you have to call them not as sign, rather traces. So Derrida has substituted the term sign with trace, because sign has a meaning, but trace is something which has a shadowy traces of several other ideas or interpretations. So this way we find that he emphasizes that understanding is shaped by what is excluded as much as by what is included. So meaning is what is there in it or what is not in it. It may range from present to absent. And I had just gave you an example that you are looking pretty, but if we had a conflict, we had a clash day before, pretty may also mean that you are not looking pretty. So a meaning is something that is not in sign can also be a meaning of it. Thus, the concept of trace challenges the metaphysics of presence. Derrida thus argues that traditional philosophy privileges presence and direct meaning, while the trace emphasizes the importance of absence and deferral. A signifier carries or may carry a spectral or ghost like presence of all those signifiers that help in or that may help in defining its identity. This ghost like presence is called traces. This means that all signifiers, instead of any positive presence, have shadowy traces. The trace, we can say, is substitute of sign, because sign actually is not a solid presence, rather it has with it a group of shadowy signs which are present as well as absent in it, and hence use the term trace instead of sign. This all signifiers, instead of any positive presence, have shadowy traces. This trace may take different forms at different levels and in different contexts. So this way he is now also talking about hauntology, that something haunts, something like the past or the future always haunts in order to make or shape the meaning of the present. Derrida's concept of hauntology, thus explored in his book Spectres of Marx, suggests that the present is perpetually haunted by the past and the future, disrupting linear notions of time and challenging the idea of a pure, unmediated presence. It's a portmanteau of haunting and ontology, highlighting how the ghosts of the past and the specters of the future shape our understanding of being and existence. Derrida thus uses hauntology to challenge the traditional philosophical concept of ontology, which means being, existence, real, or present. So he is perhaps playing with the word ontology to call it hauntology, where ontology is being, presence, and so on, whereas hauntology is not about being or present. Rather, he says that in the making of the present, past always comes to hover upon it. It casts its shadow upon the present, whereas future meaning is also embedded in present. So this way, present is not just present, rather past and future plays significantly in the making of the present meaning. So present is not just present, rather past and futures, the past as well as the specter of future is also there. Hauntology, in contrast to ontology, emphasizes the always already absent present and the way the past and future haunt the present, disrupting the notion of a stable, unified reality. Derrida uses the term spectre to refer to the ghostly spectral traces of the past and future, with what connotation a sign was in the past, what may be its future, and its meaning in different historical and geographical spaces that shape the present. These specters are neither fully present nor absent, neither dead nor alive, creating a paradoxical state of being. Derrida frequently references the line from Hamlet, "The time is out of joint." He uses this line in order to illustrate the way hauntology disrupts linear notions of time. This suggests that the past, present, and future are not simply sequential, but rather exist in a state of constantly interplay and disruption. Now, this way we come to another term, aporia. Aporia refers to a point of puzzlement or impasse in discourse. Aporia originates from the Greek word aporos, meaning a dead zone or impasse or a wide gap, indicating a range of intended or unintended meaning. It refers to highlight the gaps or fissures. So, as we were discussing right now, aporia is indicating towards limitrophy. It is also indicating towards hauntology, trace, because it means gap. Gap means when we say a sentence, when we give a statement, or when we read something in a text, it is not what it means. Rather, there is range of meanings. There are gaps, there are fissures, and now it is upon the reader to fill this gap. Readers are free to fill this gap according to the context, according to the cultural space in which he is reading, according to the geographical space in which he is reading, or according to the social space, and so on. So this way we find that texts have several gaps, and reader is now free to play upon these gaps. So now the idea of play perhaps is coming more clear in this regard, that meanings are playing freely and readers are free to fill the gaps according to the play. They had to take their own meaning according to their understanding in the particular cultural, social, and other milieus. Now, this way we are coming to the next word, that is hospitality, though it is not much used, but since it is also a term similar to aporia, we should go through it. According to Jacques Derrida, hospitality is conditional as well as unconditional. Jacques Derrida's concept of hospitality revolves basically around the tension between the ideal of unconditional welcome, welcoming the other, and the practical limitations of conditional hospitality, where welcoming is a burden, arguing that the law of hospitality demands an openness to the other without preconditions, while acknowledging the necessity of conditions for any society to function. Derrida distinguishes between an ideal of unconditional hospitality, where one welcomes the other without any conditions or expectations, and the practical reality of conditional hospitality, which involves setting of rules and limitations. Derrida also highlights the aporetic, the term which has been derived from aporia, aporetic nature of hospitality, meaning the inherent contradictions or paradox between the ideal of unconditional welcome and the necessity of conditions. Now, with this, we are moving to the last word of this particular lecture, pharmakon. In critical theory and philosophy, pharmakon can be seen as a term derived from Greek philosophy, that is a drug, or that may also mean as a medicine. It is a concept used by Derrida in order to refer to the duality of something both as remedy or a poison. So basically, Derrida, in his interpretation of Plato, used this term to explore the ambiguity and duality of things, particularly in the context of writing and speech. For example, writing, if you are considering writing, Derrida uses the pharmakon to explore the idea that writing, while being a tool for memory and knowledge, can also be a source of forgetting and distortion. So, this way, we find that Derrida's various terms, such as hauntology, aporia, and pharmakon, they illustrate the relational nature of meaning and their impact on each other. For instance, hauntology's focus on traces and ghosts resonates with aporia's exploration of ambiguity and uncertainty, reinforcing the independent fabric of deconstructed thought. Thank you.